Hello and welcome back to another episode of Talking Tents, a RaceBot TV podcast. Thank you for joining us, either live across RaceBot's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, or through the audio version released on a podcast app of your preference the very same day. As always, my name is Arjuna Kankipati, and I'm joined by veteran esports commentator Connery Maddock, with Hugo Luis controlling the action from the production room. And Connery, let's just start with you before we dive into the show. We've got some new graphics that we're delighted to be able to show off, thanks to our producer Hugo. And as we kick off episode number 8 here, looking to the future of this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. We've gotten past the awkward early stages of things, and with those first couple of episodes, and we're definitely well into the swing of things now. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be on these podcasts so far. So here's to many, many more.
Yeah, look at the production value. If you're watching us live, we both have some kind of virtual background replacement. I've got a green screen. Connery's got a black screen now. But let's dive in then and talk about the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. And we're now joined by the event organizer, Tanner Watkins, who has been putting in a lot of work over the last week and a half as we build up to the race itself. And Tanner, glad you can join us. I was on the Today at the 500 show with you yesterday, where we talked a little bit about qualifying and some of the storylines. But this is a great event. It's all about trying to honor the Indianapolis 500 that happens every month of May, and a lot of the traditions and the qualifying that goes into this is replicated in our virtual event.
Yeah, no, we worked very hard to try and take what we enjoy at the 500 in real life and put that into a virtual event that really replicates those traditions and the feelings, the emotions of the 500-mile race every Memorial Day weekend. So far, the competitors have really enjoyed it. It's gotten a lot of positive reviews from the sim racing community, and we're very happy to do it. It's something that we put on, and certainly doesn't earn us any money. But again, it's the community support that really keeps us going and motivates us to do more.
And let's talk just a little bit about qualifying, because 2 days of qualifying, we had coverage of both days on RaceBot TV, Pole Day and Bump Day. But one of the unique things about this is 12 hours of qualifying each day. However, each driver only gets 3 runs, and there was a lot of pressure. We saw a few drivers, especially last year's pole sitter, Young O, feeling the pressure, and we talked about this last week on the Today at the 500 show. There is a lot of butterflies that some of these top sim racing drivers feel when they roll out onto the track for their qualifying runs. And the final hour of Bump Day was some of the most tense racing action I can imagine, and that was during qualifying. Multiple drivers getting bumped from the field, a few drivers securing their spots in the 33-car field as well. And now it all builds up to the race next weekend with what's looking like one of the strongest Indy 500 fields that any virtual race has ever seen.
Yeah, I always say, almost in a cruel sense, I really enjoy to watch the difficulty and watch these drivers struggle throughout qualifications, because I know how hard it is to go out there and try to put down 4 really optimal laps, even in iRacing Indy 500 qualifications, when you have unlimited attempts. I know how difficult that can be, and the stress as you're on a qualifications run and you get to laps 3 and 4, you know you're on a good run, it weighs on you. So to know that you only have limited attempts in your back pocket, we talked previously, Arjuna, you and I, about comments that Young O made to me last year, how he ended up being the pole sitter, but for the first time in his sim racing career, and he's a very accomplished sim racer, he actually felt butterflies on the pit lane before going out and making his run. He said he had never felt that before. And so when we talked to him at the end of the day on Bump Day, after he had sweated through, like you said, 24 hours of qualifications where they did not have the pace this year that they had last year, he said, to be on the other side of the coin, he has never been in that position before where he's had to really race his way in. And that brought out a lot of emotion in him as well. So to create that sort of environment and that challenge in qualifications really speaks to what we're building here, and making it what we truly believe is the world's greatest sim race. And we stand by that, because we think this is one of the most difficult events to qualify for. The field is absolutely stacked. We thought last year was one of the best iRacing Indy 500 fields ever. And that year's event had 7 former top split winners in it. This year we have 12. So it's just a fantastic batch of talent. we just try to get better year over year, and I think we've done that for 2020.
And two of those previous winners are rookies to Open Wheels 500 competitions. So that just illustrates some of these drivers who didn't maybe make it into the field last year, having this opportunity to try and get that title in the Open Wheels 500. Let's talk a little bit about the international flavor of the field, though, because last year 3 Europeans took the podium. It was Constantini in first, Liam Quinn in second, and Henry Bennett in third. Another very diverse field, 16 drivers from the US, 6 representing the UK and Ireland, 5 from Scandinavia, 3 from Canada, 2 from Brazil, 1 from Italy. It's a very diverse field, and it illustrates that despite the fact that the Indy 500 is a spectacle that, being a tradition in American racing, this is a race that so many people around the world get invested in, and it's great to have this virtual replication, given that so many things we miss in the iRacing Indy 500 are coming over into this Open Wheel 500. Look at the Veterans 100 and the pit stop competition that we'll have coverage of on the Saturday before the race. So many more events that go into this that make it more than just 500 miles of racing.
Yeah, and that's, we try to package together the full Indy 500 experience, and so that brings in those support events such as the Veterans 100 and the pit stop competition. And for us, it is great to see the worldwide support. We've got people from Sweden and Italy and Brazil talking about this race, and for me that's spectacular, because it was just a thought back in June of last year, and now to be where we are at this point. You talk about Michele Costantini. Arguably, you could say that last year's Open Wheels 500 win really was that big break for him. He was very competitive in the iRacing Indy 500 this past May. Now he's attempting to qualify for the Porsche World Championship on iRacing with a lot of money at stake, so best of luck to him. But he's parlayed that into a pole award now at this year's Open Wheels 500, continuing to ride that momentum. He's joined by Wilson Neto, a Brazilian on the front row in the middle, qualified second once again this year, so again a near miss for Wilson. But then you've got Christopher Demerit on the outside of the front row. Can an American break in and not only get on the podium this year, but can they contend for a win? Because at the end of the race last year, Christopher Demerit was relegated to helping Constantini make it on fuel before the yellow came out that ultimately ended the race. So many storylines at play. I've said before, Indy writes the stories, and we just kind of sit back and kind of cover them as they unfold, because this kind of event, there's going to be headlines, there's going to be interesting topics to talk about. It's just natural at Indy, and we're very blessed to have had the event we've had so far, and we're looking forward to this weekend.
So one final question before I let you go, Tanner. A lot of work has been put in on the production side as well, and you have had a lot of additional coverage than what we've been able to provide at RaceBot on the Open Wheels TV channel. But one of the interesting things is at least for me as an announcer, leading off some of these broadcasts, you hear that distinctive theme, IndyCar on ABC. You got the rights to use that, and we're going to be using it for the race broadcast as well. But something you just announced today is there's going to be more performances that we're going to be able to air as a result of some of these agreements. And all of this is going to be live on Open Wheels TV with some of our pre-race coverage that you're going to have just before that big race on Sunday.
Yeah, no, again, like you said at the outset there, we're very thankful that the good folks at ABC Circle Music, Faye Constantine, were able to help get us permission to use the IndyCar on ABC theme. I think it's an iconic theme, and I was sad to see it go when the TV deal between IndyCar and ABC and ESPN changed hands back in 2019. But we were able to bring that back, and now it's the official sound of the Open Wheels 500, and that's a huge honor for us. Then you couple that with some of the pre-race festivities, as you mentioned. We'll have Phil Kaiser back to sing Back Home Again in Indiana this year. He sang it last year, and he's an Indianapolis native with strong ties to the Indy 500, so that's great to have him back. We'll have taps as part of the pre-race ceremony, another big staple at the Indianapolis 500. And then, like you said, we just announced today that the U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone will perform the national anthem and God Bless America during pre-race on Sunday. So to get that sort of involvement, and today is Veterans Day, it was a perfect day for us to announce that portion of our pre-race ceremonies. That's what we're trying to bring to this race weekend in November is a lot of that patriotism and that support of our armed forces that really makes, just another element of the Indy 500 so important. We try to replicate that the best we can and in the most honorable way that we can on this weekend, and I think we're on our way to doing that.
Well, Tanner, thanks for joining us and previewing this weekend's open wheel 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions. Full coverage will be available on RaceSpot TV. We've got the Veterans 100 qualifying. That'll be Friday evening. And Saturday afternoon, we got the day before the 500, coverage of the Veterans 100 and the pit stop competition before the big race itself, Sunday, November 15th, 11:30 a.m. Eastern, and then 8:30 a.m. Pacific. Having to do some quick math in my head. Never good on a Wednesday morning. But Tanner, thanks for joining us, and we can't wait for the race this weekend.
Yeah, no, thanks again, guys, for all your support. RaceSpot TV has been the best broadcast partner that we could have asked for. It's funny that in the end, Masters Week is happening right now here in the States. And I talked to Will Vincent back in the spring how I wanted our relationship between the Open Wheels 500 and RaceSpot TV to be that of the Masters and CBS, where it's just such a wonderful pairing of broadcast partner and event. I think we've got that here, and you guys have done a fantastic job to this point. Looking forward to this weekend, and hopefully we have a wonderful race.
That was Tanner Watkins, host of the Open Wheels 500-mile race. And Connery, I just want to bring you in before we talk to our special guest, because a lot of the time, I feel like people think that us as commentators, we only sit there and talk about races. However, a lot of us like to race as well, and our own Randy Cheneth was trying to qualify for this one. Unfortunately, didn't make the field, but he will be the first alternate, and I know Randy put in a lot of time for this, and, he's gone from commentating on last year's race to trying to qualify for this year's race. It's good to see that, us as commentators, we like to get out there on track as well and try and show that we don't just know how to talk about racing, we know how to race as well.
I mean, I would agree with you, but the last broadcasted race I took part in, I accidentally wrecked someone on the start, so I possibly can't say the same for me, but at least for everyone else, yeah, you're absolutely right. You just look at Paul Smith, Smileable on Twitch, he's very, very into his racing as well. I do it sort of more off stream when it comes to that. Maybe I'll start streaming. I don't know. I don't know what the situation will be when it comes to that. But yeah, we just have a passion for what we do. We wouldn't be talking about it if we didn't also do it. So that's just how the situation is.
And then let's start looking ahead to our conversation that we're about to have with Moritz Löhner, because before we do that, we usually talk to people who have competed on iRacing and their World Championships. And while Moritz has done that, a lot of his success, has come in other simulators, specifically Race Room. And you've had the pleasure of commentating on some of those recently, both the ADAC GT Masters Esports as well as the DTM Esports, both of which Moritz won the title in this year. Talk to us about some of the differences that you see, not in terms of the broadcast necessarily, but in terms of the racing, because obviously they're two very different simulators, but Race Room produces some fantastic wheel-to-wheel racing, especially in those cars that you've been able to go out there and see.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a bit of a mixed bag, but again, every sim is a bit of a mixed bag. Let's just say that, pros and cons of each. But at least my experience with doing a good chunk of Race Room stuff now is that it actually contact is much more forgiving. I will say. I think Moritz will agree with me on that one once we get to talking with him. Contact's more forgiving. It does promote more side-by-side battling and sort of leaning on each other, so to speak, because of the way the net code works in that particular game. You have a bit of contact in Race Room that will completely spin out the car on iRacing, for example. I'm not saying either one is correct. It's just the way things tend to be in that one. But yeah, we've seen some fantastic racing in both of those two championships, and Moritz has been in a healthy share of all of those battles.
So let me try and just list off some accomplishments then as we bring in Moritz Löhner, who drives for Williams Esports, two-time ADAC GT Masters Esports champion, this year's DTM Esports champion, this year's Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Deutschland champion, as well as a participant in the Super Racer Bootcamp as he tried to qualify for a full ride in a GT4 car in the real world. So Moritz, delighted to have you on the podcast now. And Let's talk a little bit about just this past year, because it's been a very hectic one despite all of the restrictions that have been put in place on various people. You've been participating in so many different tournaments. You've still been traveling as you would to some of these events, and been a very successful year for you. And I have to assume that as we approach the end of 2020, for what for some people might have been a difficult year, has been a very successful one for you.
Hey, thanks first of all for having me. Yeah, like the year started off pretty good, I would say, with thinking about going to the Super Racer bootcamp and driving like the Porsche Cayman GT4. But then, yeah, COVID kicked in. This got delayed as well, and obviously all the Lan events got cancelled. And I'm usually the guy who's really good on Lan events, not maybe that good online. So I thought, this might not be the best year for me, but I think now looking back, it worked out pretty well.
And we'll talk a little bit about that, because you have had a lot of success in LAN events, but let's work it all the way back to when you were a young sim racer, because you were one of these people who I think was fortunate in that you didn't just stumble upon sim racing. Your father was a sim racer. You got the opportunity to try his setup, and then very shortly after that, you got your own PC, you got your own G27, and that's where your love of sim racing started. With a lot of the classic sim racing titles, you got the likes of Race 07, GTR2, and R Factor, which I'm sure a lot of people like myself can remember testing back in the day, and you've been around all the way since then. So talk to us about those initial years and how maybe your father's influence helped you get into sim racing.
Yeah, my father always was a motorsports fan. We don't live far away from the Norris Ring, where the DTM runs every year. So I think I went there as soon as I turned 6 or 7. We went there every year. This year was actually the first ever year we couldn't go there because it got cancelled. So that's where I got my motorsports genes from. And from there on in, like my father always had a steering wheel and pedals. I think it was the Momo Steering Force GT back in the days. And yeah, actually from a magazine we got R Factor, Race 07 and GTR2, and these were my first racing games, I would say. For sure we played a lot of Gran Turismo with my brother and stuff, but those were the first games I really took not kind of serious, but where I really wanted to play a lot. And that's how I found into these games and actually started driving sim racing.
Yeah, and of course, with a lot of those older sims as well, a lot of people who are sort of more seasoned, shall we say, in the sim racing community will remember, how those games, how those sims, tended to be. What's the evolution been like as a driver from those very, very old sims into some of the more recent ones like Iracing and Race Room? Is there an absolute drastic difference, or is there, or are there still lots of similarities between all of them?
I would say you can feel the similarities between Race 07 and Race Room because it come from the same developers.
Of course.
So you feel it's kind of the same, but of course the years of development within the game is completely different. So it's actually feels like a completely different game in the end. But yeah, I think I started driving Race Room as soon as it came out, so early 2013. I did a lot of racing there, but obviously back then there was no big competitions because the game was still in development. It was like a beta. So I then jumped onto Assetto Corsa when it came out, and yeah, did lots of community races with the same community. I did races on Race 07, R Factor, and GTR2. So yeah, and then I think Race Room started to actually do some hot lap competitions with their leaderboard system, where you can actually win some stuff, maybe go to Lan events and such things. So I went back to Race Room, did these leaderboard competitions. I think the very first one was actually from the DTM as well, with the DTM Winter Cup and the Virtual Championship. And back then I really wasn't good, and back then no one even practiced for races. We just came on in the evening, did maybe half an hour of preparation to know the track, to know the car and stuff, and then we raced against each other. And in the winter series, I actually got the 3rd place and went to the real DTM at the season final, and we both, like all the top 3, were on the real podium where the champions of the real DTM were standing like a few minutes before. And we got our trophies. We got a really big bottle of champagne, but no one told us we could spray it and we actually get it. So no one of us actually had like second clothes with us. So that was a bit unfortunate and disappointing, but in the end it was a great experience. And from then on, the thing kicked off with, in the next year, Mercedes did competitions 3 years in a row where we had, like, I think pretty much the first Lan events of whole sim racing. And yeah, I qualified for that 2 times. I won it 1 time in the rookie competition. Those were really good experiences, but back then I was so young. I think I was 15, 16. So I didn't think of the whole picture yet, and I actually didn't prepare myself for those races. I just went there and had fun. And yeah, now to see the development to where it's now, it's really big.
And talk to us then about those initial few years in Race Room, because you mentioned some of the success that you've had, but you do talk about not doing too much practice. Is that because of the way that a lot of the system was built around back then, where you talk about those leaderboard challenges, you're kind of hopping between different car and track combos and just trying to have as much fun rather than what it ended up being towards 2016 and then 2017 when you dived into iRacing, a bit more serious, focusing on working with a team? I'm sure back in 2013, running by yourself, that's when you were getting exposed to some of these competitions before you then signed up with your first sim racing team.
Yeah, I think in Race Room, the thing with a lot of practice really developed starting this year, actually, with the GT Masters Championship, because earlier there really were no competitions where you had to practice a lot. Like, I think no one had to practice a lot for the races. Yeah, when I started driving iRacing, I got picked up by Core Motorsports, and at the time they got 2nd in the first ever World Championship there in the GT3 cars. So I really had to step up my game with practicing hours before even going into a good service race, and that really changed my thinking of the stuff. And I actually started practicing more on Race Room, which helped me seeing I can be much faster there as well and actually win stuff, because back then I didn't win a lot of stuff. I just was in the midfield, I would say. And I think joining Core Motorsports back in the days with a really good environment with a lot of fast drivers that I had to compete with, it helped me a lot to develop that mindset to really prepare yourself for big races coming up.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that evolution, but talk to us then about that transition into iRacing. It started in 2017. You immediately jumped into the World Championship competitions, but what was your primary reasoning for wanting to jump into iRacing? Was it, you see some of these World Championship competitions, you see the broadcasts, you want to compete with them, or were you starting to think that maybe Race Room had certain competitions that you could focus on, and then there were other competitions that you wanted to focus on the iRacing side?
I saw iRacing even back in the days when I did Race 07. I always saw iRacing and I always wanted to drive it because I watched the Formula 1 WCS, and I was always amazed about the people driving there, and I wanted to be in this World Championship because this was kind of a big deal for me. And yeah, but I never was able to join iRacing when I was that young, because it was that subscription system which my parents didn't agree with that much. So I think when I turned, when was it? 16, I think. Then I was really, no, it was 17 or 18 when I was old enough to sign up for stuff like this with a yearly subscription and stuff. Then my parents really allowed it. Then I signed up for it, and I think I did my first 2 weeks of driving Master and actually gaining my A license within maybe half a week, and then I went into the GT3 instantly. And I think half a month after that, Core discovered me, sent me a message, and asked me if I really wanted to join them or see if I would be suitable to join them. And 6 months after I signed up for iRacing, I actually went into my first World Championship back then. So that was quite fast, maybe a bit too fast, because I really wasn't on pace back then already. Because iRacing, I think, for iRacing you need a lot of practice and experience to be, on a top level. So that was maybe a bit rushed, but it was a really great time.
And did you find yourself having to unlearn specific things that you found worked in Race Room but didn't work in iRacing? Because Connery mentioned, for example, the car contacts that are different between the two sims. There's driving, little things about driving style as well that you have to tweak, especially for iRacing and its tire model. Was that something that you had to overcome? And was that something that you found yourself having to deal with in the World Championship competitions, given that quick, leap up to top level competition?
I think the biggest deal really was the tires, because in Race Room you can really be aggressive to the tires and aggressive in your whole driving style, and you really had to change that because 2-3 years ago on iRacing the tires were like one small slide and you're done. So that I really had to adapt to it, but I think I did it pretty good. Like, it wasn't a huge deal that I was struggling really hard to get used to it. It was just, for me, I'm a guy who jumps between different sims quite frequently. Maybe not this year, maybe this year I concentrated a bit more to one. But for me, going into a different sim is more like jumping into a different car from one sim. So the change of getting used to it isn't that big of a deal for me, I would say.
So you talk about looking at that iRacing World Championship Grand Prix series. You go from competing then in 2017 in the GT3 cars to next year you compete in 8 rounds in that World Championship Grand Prix series. Talk to us about that emotion, because you've had some success at Race Room at this point. You talk about some of those DTM Mercedes events, but this is now being a part of an event that you talk about wanting to be a part of. Did you feel a little bit overwhelmed at some times in that season? Because a lot of that time you were also running as a private entry, so you didn't necessarily maybe have all the team support that you did, later on in your career now with Williams Esports. What was that first solo season of World Championship competition like?
Yeah, it was crazy because I did the Pro Series all on my own. And I think midway through the Pro Series, I teamed up with Paschalis Gergis and Josh Rogers to really help each other out in the practice with the setup and stuff, because we were all on our own. So we thought it would be a good idea to help each other out, because no one of core wanted to do Formula 1. And this was my first time ever I was completely on my own, because in the GT3 I kind of got carried by the other guys who had a lot more experience, and they qualified the car. They most of the times the qualifying of the real races. So this was the first time I was on my own. I had to figure out setup on my own. I had to do my practice stuff on my own. And this was really a big deal, because I think I developed myself into getting better in practice and not rely on others more than do stuff on your own. And even if I was with core at the start of the season, I still was on my own. I felt like a privateer. But and when we were a privateer, then I still had those guys in the background, but obviously they had no idea of the Formula 1 car, so I was still all by myself. And for me it was crazy that I actually qualified for it, because setups were never really my big thing. I never had a big setup knowledge, so finding actually something good in a Formula 1 car was big. And qualifying for it was like the biggest thing I ever accomplished back in the days. And the series was really hard, because a lot of drivers were in that had so much experience already. I tried to do my best there, had a lot of fun on the way, and I think end of the season I jumped back to Race Room then again.
Yeah, and of course, being one of those very many drivers that actually has competed across at the top level across different sims. You know, there are lots of people who compete across different sims. There's not a lot of people who compete in, you know, at the very top level across those different sims. But you know, at least in your experience, you know, in that, do you think there will ever be a driver who is the absolute best at every single sim, sort of like the sim racing Jesus or something like that, or is that not possible? I mean, we got a glimpse of, you know, what sort of multi-platform competition would be like with the recent DTM Esports Super Finale, getting a lot of the fast sim races from a lot of different sims all into one platform and all into one race. Do you think someone, you know, potentially has the skill to be able to, no matter what platform, go in and kill it?
It depends. I think everyone has the opportunity to do it if the championships are split. The first championship on iRacing, for example, is at the start of the year, and then the big championship of Race Room is at the end of the year. That you can actually focus on both. Because this year for me it was all mixed up, and I really had to say I'll only do this. And yeah, for me at the time it was cancel iRacing for this year. So if the competitions are split up and you have the time to prepare for the second sim after you finish the first championship in the first sim, then yes, I would say you can do it. But a lot of drivers are so focused on one game right now that I think they would really struggle, first of all, to get used to the second sim. Whilst I kinda have the knowledge of every sim right now, but yeah, coming back to iRacing now, I really struggle right now. Like, everyone is so fast, and I still have to keep up with them and try to find the pace again after being away for half a year. So it's really hard, but I think if you have enough time to prepare for the championship, then you can do it for sure.
Well, let's drill down then, Moritz, on some of the things that you do trying to keep current across not just various different cars, but various different sims. Like we say, you've competed on Race Room in the ADAC GT Masters, which would be GT3, DTM Esports, which would of course be those Class 1 regulations. Then you've got the World TCR Championship that you were also involved with. So that's something that we talked to Bo Albert a few weeks ago about, and he mentioned just a lot of time. But when you're then also crossing over sims, you mentioned knowledge. How much time are you spending, not in terms of the driving, but on the outside, maybe looking in, talking to various different people, trying to just understand different things? Is that something that you find helps you as opposed to just going out there and doing the driving? Or do you find that it's mostly just about finding some seat time, and that's where obviously a lot of people struggle?
I think it's all about driving for me personally, because I don't gain anything when I talk to my teammates and say, hey, how do I have to drive this? How do I have to drive this? I just have to drive. I'm not the guy who does data comparison. I never was into that, so I just jump into the car and drive my laps and try to get better.
I'm just going to drill down very quickly then. So you don't do any type of data comparison, because talking to specifically a lot of the iRacing World Championship drivers, that's something that they do, you know, whether it be a virtual racing school using that online telemetry, or, you know, going into Motec and actually opening up those files and building a workbook to analyze driving and car data. Is that something you don't really do too much of, and something that, like you say, you just focus on going out there and extracting the maximum performance that you can find out on track?
Yeah, I've never done data comparison, like never. I just look at my time of driving. Like, I like to see how much time I put into practice for a specific race. When I see I've done 20 hours, then I can feel more confident than when I see, I just did 10 hours for this race. So it might get hard to qualify up the top and run up the top. But this one helps to see how much I practiced, but looking at data to see where does my teammate brake or where does he accelerate, I've never done that, and I don't think it really helps me, because I have to find it out for myself where to really go into the power or go into the brake, and where the best line sits.
Yeah, and you know, when it comes to those, again, just going back to the sort of multi-platform stuff, like you said, it's mainly the preparation that's preventing a lot of sim racers, a lot of professional sim racers, to spread themselves thin across loads of different sims and loads of different cars. Do you think that there's anything that tournament organizers or developers can actually do to help there, as in regards to not having events clash so much? I know there's always going to be clashes here and there. You know, there's only a limited amount of primetime weekend slots to go around. But do you think there needs to be more cooperation in terms of tournament organizers to make sure that for those drivers that do want to actually compete across multiple tournaments and championships and sims, that they're able to do so?
I mean, it would be nice, but it would probably never happen, even though it could help like the different platforms themselves to gain viewers, because they would only steal viewers from themselves if they all like stream on the same time slot. But yeah, with so many competitions popping up recently, I think it's hard to really communicate and trying to get a free time slot for every weekend and stuff. So I think it would be nice for a driver like myself, but in the end, if you really want to be up the top and be competitive, I think you should concentrate on really one thing. If it clashes a bit, then if it clashes a bit, you should really concentrate on only one thing. And if you have 1 month apart of the championships, then you could really consider doing both. And yeah, so it doesn't really make sense for developers to really communicate it, because in the end people will just concentrate on the thing they wanna be the best at, and they wanna actually win.
Well, Moritz, I got a question about something you mentioned just a few minutes ago. You talked about your hours of practice, and one thing that's come to light in the last year was Brian Lockwood, who very famously did 60 hours of practice for the opening round of the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup. What's the most amount of practice that you tend to do for an event? Do you find yourself doing more practice in the build-up to a LAN event, where obviously you have to travel to it? You might not have as much practice once you get to the on-site event. And how much do you end up doing on average across all of your maybe weekly competitions?
60 hours is absolutely insane. I never did anything close to it. I don't know when I had to start like 4 weeks in advance to actually get to the time. When I do practice for the GT Masters, for example, I try to get my 20 hours in about 1 week, which is quite a lot if you work full time. And that's the aim I try to get for every race I compete in, like those 20 hours. But I never actually practiced that much for LAN events. I try to practice for LAN events. I try to practice braking points, turn-in points and stuff to really know when to turn in and stuff. But because of the LAN event, you have different simulator, you have different monitors and stuff. So you can't prepare for that. So you can only prepare for when do I actually have to brake, when I have to turn in, and that you can like get into the other simulator you're in as well, because braking points are always the same, but the feel is different. And yeah, that's why you just have to see for yourself where really braking points are, because that you can use in the different simulator as well.
Well, let's dive into LAN events then, because you mentioned earlier that LAN events is something that you find that you excel at. And, you know, unfortunately this year they haven't been as prevalent as maybe we would have liked. And LAN events and sim racing are growing in terms of the number of events that we have and the scale of events that we also have. But when you made the switch over to Williams Esports in mid-2018, you then qualified for the Porsche World Championship the very next year. And while that season might not have gone the smoothest for you, what did go well was the Porsche Sim Racing Trophy at the Sim Racing Expo. You got second in that. So let's talk about LAN events, because you mentioned not being able to do so much practice, having to adapt to the equipment that each different arena is going to provide for you. Why do you think you're so much better at that maybe than compared to some of your competitors? You maybe struggle to adapt to that. Is that just because some drivers like to be secure in the rig that they have at home, the configuration that they have? Whereas, like you say, you've got to be able to adapt to that, and that's something that you seem to be very comfortable doing.
Yeah, from what I've seen in the last few sim expos, a lot of people really struggle with going into a different sim than what they have at their own home. And I tend to really get used to the new equipment quite fast, and that was always my positive point in LAN events, and that was quite heavily seen on the Sim Racing Expo Porsche Trophy, because I jumped into the new simulator, and I did really not really good times because I obviously was still very much slower than what I could do at home. But I was more comfortable with the new equipment, and I was able to put it into time, and was most of the time fastest in practice sessions and in qualifying sessions as well. And the races went pretty much perfect as well for me, with no major mistakes, while everyone else had big slides or bad qualifying and stuff like that. So I think I have a good ability to get used to new equipment, and that really helps me in Lan Events.
And do you feel a bit lucky that you get these opportunities? Because while on the iRacing side, Lan Events maybe aren't as big, Race Room is continuing to put on bigger and bigger events. The World Touring Car Championship went to Malaysia. You got the opportunity to fly out to Asia for that event and to compete for the prize money. That must be a pretty surreal experience as well. You know, flying out to a foreign country that you've maybe never been before, especially a place like Malaysia, where, given that I grew up in Singapore, it is westernized, but it is still going to be very different from your home, of course. What's the most exotic thing that you've got to experience on one of these trips? And what are some of the fun stories that you've had to tell coming out of these events, where maybe you get to meet some new people that you maybe never would have really thought about meeting in person ever before?
It's crazy. Like, Malaysia was the most craziest thing, because I never was on a vacation with my family where we had to fly somewhere or go really far away. We always stayed kind of in Germany or the countries around it. So that was the first time I really went away quite a long distance. But it was a great experience to know you can fly there for pretty much for free, and actually gain money if you compete there. It's a really nice feeling, and it's really nice to be there. I tried to get there a little bit earlier, to have like 1 or 2 days to do some sightseeing and stuff, which was really nice there. But to be honest, the country there isn't too much different, or the city I was in, because I think there are a lot of people from all around the world there that live there. So it actually wasn't that much of a difference to Germany or other countries. It wasn't that exotic. For sure, like temples and stuff from the Buddha, it was quite a nice experience and quite nice to see. But in the end, it didn't look that much different to what we have in Europe here.
Well, I guess you probably were in KL, Kuala Lumpur as well. So capital city, you got the Petronas Towers, lots of big exotic buildings, skyscrapers and things like that. So, but in terms of these LAN events, let's talk about the atmosphere as well, because I think that's one thing that, Connery, you can attest to as well. There is a different energy in that room. And Connery, just take this question a bit further. LAN events are something that I can't wait to be a part of as well. And you've had the opportunity, Connery, to be a part of quite a few.
Well, quite a few, not just in sim racing, but in other games as well, in other esports. But as a spectator as well, you know, I went to the Counter-Strike Major in London. I went to one of the Dota 2 events in Birmingham. You know, these big arena venues, and you know, just to have that sort of energy. And it was a similar sort of energy at the Sim Racing Expo, with that sort of venue with spectators in there as well. It just gives a different meaning really to what we do, because you don't feel too in the moment as far as the normal online broadcasts go. You don't feel like things are significant. You don't feel like you're a part of the event. But for LAN events, you know, when you have that sort of noise of the crowd, even like subtle things of, you know, awesome TV shots of the drivers or the stage and things like that, it really adds another element. And Moritz as a driver is as those events become more and more common, fingers crossed, you know, once COVID decides to go away, is there going to be what sort of factors into your minds there in those sorts of live events? Does all these sort of chaos that happens around the sort of event, like the crowd, like technical people annoying you, or, you know, having the speakers from the commentators, you know, blaring out, do any of those distract you, or are you able to focus? And do you think that's going to be different between all the other drivers as well?
I think when you're in the sim, you're pretty much focused. I really like the environment when you talk to your competitors, talk to teammates, like face to face. I really like that feeling, and also have like spectators behind you. Probably also have like camera guys running around you. Is kind of fun. But when you jump into the simulator, you're shortly before the race, you put on the headset and start driving out of the pit. At that point, you're so focused and you kind of blend out everything that's happening around you. But what you do sometimes here is like when maybe you yourself do a really good move and the commentators keep shouting, you hear that through the headset, and that gives you a little push. It doesn't distract you, but it really gives you a little push to even push further and try to maybe overtake a lot more people if you're not in the front.
And I tell you, that is actually a good thing in sim racing, because if the drivers can actually hear you in sim racing, it doesn't matter, because there's nothing that we can say that the drivers don't already know, and it's different in Counter-Strike and in so many other esports where there's a lot of like secret information, because the commentators can give away positions of enemy players, for example. In sim racing, you don't have that, so I guess like the sort of crowd energy and the commentator energy actually does help the drivers in this instance, and gets them motivated, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. It gives a little push, and it's also nice because at home I just can't put on the broadcast onto my headset and listen to it as well. It would at that point it would distract me, but hearing like the small shoutings when something happens, or even if something behind me happens, I would maybe look up if I can see the screen and look a little bit what's happening right now. It's just a lot of fun, the Lan Events.
Don't do that in the middle of a corner though. Like that seems pretty dangerous. But yeah, go on, Ian.
No, I think that's a good opportunity then to move on from the LAN events, because we talk about the success in the Porsche Sim Racing Trophy. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, that Super Cup quest to try and make it maybe for the next year as well didn't go that smoothly. You did have more success in 2019 in the GTE endurance with the Williams Esports Razor car coming in 5th place in that season, but 2020 has been a year focused on race room Moritz. Why did you decide to do that? Was it these opportunities that have sort of been opened in many ways due to what's happened, this year with so many series having to go virtual? DTM Esports, I think, is a fairly new thing, but ADAC GT Masters has been something you've been focusing on now for a few years. Why step away from iRacing? Yes, you did do a few of the Porsche Sprint Challenge races, but for the most part, I think it's been a year where most of your attention has been focused onto Race Room.
Yeah, I think I was always focused on Race Room, but back in some years ago, I was always able to run both, because there weren't that much competitions, and I was able to run it, pretty much side by side. But starting last year, I think it was like there were so many competitions going on that I already started to focus a little bit on Race Room, and I did the GT Masters there as well and won the title. And this year there was so much going on. We sort of started in April already with the GT Masters, because there should have been everything LAN as well. We had 7 events planned, of which every event should have been offline at a LAN event. But that got pushed back, and I originate from Race Room, and I always knew or always know that I have the pace to be P1 on Race Room, to win championships there. While it's on iRacing, it's a much harder task for me. So I just said to myself, and because in the previous years I was jumping between sims so frequently, I maybe noticed that maybe you should concentrate on only one thing and actually try your best there to really win maybe everything if it's possible. And I did that this year. Tried to really only concentrate on Race Room with the DTM, with the GT Masters. Also WTCR started earlier this year with Beat the Pro, and I think it really paid out to really concentrate on one thing and don't jump between sims all the time, because I really noticed that you actually gain a lot more knowledge of one game if you keep driving it for over a whole year.
Well, it also helps. We've got a few of your Williams Esports teammates jumping into our chat. Arthur LaHook saying he's a big fan of yours. It must help, though, when you can see some of your teammates having success on those other platforms to then commit your time, like you say, to improving on the one that's been your first title. It's the one that you've had a lot of success over the years with. How disappointing was it, though, to lose out on those LAN events? Because obviously, like you say, ADAC GT Masters, a lot of that was planned to be held on site in an environment that you relish, it seems, for competing. Were you a little bit worried then when that change was announced and you knew that you would have to do everything from home, without a lot of those different elements that come in a LAN event? Was there a bit of concern, or was it always feeling very confident in your Mahler Racing team Williams Esports car?
There was definitely concern. When I knew everything had to be cancelled, I was like, oof, this won't be a fun year for me because, as I've said already, I'm mostly really good at LANs and I never was that good on online events. So I was looking forward to the LAN events to actually win stuff there because, as I said, I'm pretty good there. And with the cancellation of everything, my mood got a little bit down. But now at the end, I really see I can also put in the same pace online, maybe even better, and win most of the stuff.
And so what were some of the changes that you made then? Because I'm sure there was some things that you decided to revisit with this change, because you're defending a title and you went out there and it was a close season this year in the ADAC GT Masters. Maybe Connery, you can talk about some of the action that you got to call as part of that broadcast, but it was close and it came all the way down to that final race. You got pushed for this title defense this time around.
Yeah. Well, I would just take that one as well. I'll just add to it before Moritz answers. And I agree with you that that final round was quite tense. It kind of got very tense towards the end. I'm pretty sure you'll agree there, Moritz, with Garcia chasing down the race leader. With a pass on the race leader there would have meant that Garcia would have won the championship, and Löhner would have been in seconds, and that was just the last of very many close moments throughout that championship. Just take me through that final round, especially though, because it looked like in the first half of the race you kind of had it in the bag.
Yeah, kind of. Like the whole year was for me up and downs. Like even after the second race where I got a penalty of 6 points, which is huge in this point system, I was already this championship is over. You don't even have to compete anymore. But then I don't just give up. I continue, and I always placed really good in the races, but never really up the top. I even got my pole position taken away on the Sachsenring. Couldn't win there, only second place. To the end of the season, I got better and placed my car up the top positions more frequently. And everything went really, really good in the last event, first race in Oschersleben, with second place at the start and second place in the finish. There I got the championship lead for the first time of the season. Just like last year, I think. Last year I as well was P5 coming to the last event and winning it there with two times P2. And this year as well got the championship lead in the first race of the two finals. And qualifying was really bad, or not bad, but it wasn't the best for the second race, and I only started 5th, I think. And I exactly knew where I had to be because Nestor got pole, and if he won the race, I had to be second. To beat him on better positions, I think. So it was a lot of pressure for me. I had two of my teammates in front of me, which made it a bit easier or a bit more relaxed for me because I knew if it really comes down to it, they would obviously help me. In the end, Nestor got overtaken by Kevin. Nestor really had to shine there, but he made a mistake in the first lap already and lost the lead, which really helped me in the end. I got up to 4th in the first lap as well, and I overtook Jack for 3rd during the pit stops. And for more than half of the race, I was behind Nestor then. And I could relax there because I knew if I'm staying 3rd and he stays 2nd, then I'm absolutely fine. And Kevin was pulling away at the front, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is all under control. And yeah, but in the end, Kevin really struggled with the tires, and I think in the last 5 laps, Nestor closed the gap of 2 seconds to Kevin, and I was like, ooh, this is going to be really intense in the end again. And I was so afraid that Kevin would make a slight mistake and Nestor would take advantage of it, because Nestor is a driver who always takes like every small advantage that a guy of you in front of him does. So there was a lot of excitement in the end, but yeah, it just worked out in the end, and I got the title again for the second time.
Yeah, especially given the circumstances, like you said, you're expecting Lan Events, went all online, you're still able to come away with it by a very small margin, but you're still able to get it in the bag, and especially at a very tough final track as well. Oschersleben, it was exactly a similar sort of race to, I think, the Sachsenring, where a lot of drivers just simply couldn't get past each other, and it was very dependent on qualifying and in those pit stops as well. And he did very well to try and get a good launch off the line and pick up as many as he can, and also pulling off the undercut to get past some drivers as well. Is at least in terms of some of the other competitors' performances in that race, Kevin Siggy actually very much was a bit of a spoiler, I would say. I think he kind of helped you a little bit. Of course, he wasn't intending to to really help anyone, but he had a massive amount of pace in that last race, which he didn't show throughout any of the other rounds of the season. He kind of had some tough luck. Do you think he's going to be a big competitor coming into any next season of the GT Masters Esports, or is it just a one-off for him?
Yeah, I think Kevin is one of the best drivers in whole sim racing. Like on R Factor, he's, I think, one of the best, if not the best. And on Race Room as well, like he showed it in the DTM Super Final, he won it. He was so fast in the last 2 events of the GT Masters. It's kind of a shame that he kinda gave up after the first race, I think. Okay. Where he placed P7, and then he already had a bad mood about it. I don't know why. But yeah, then I think he could have been up the top for the championship contention, if not, yeah, the favorite for the championship, if he really continued practicing a lot for GT Masters. And I think if he comes back in 2021 and tries to really focus on it, he could be one of the biggest threats for the championship title, of course.
Well, there you go. Are you gonna?
So let's move it on then to one of our final topics, Moritz. Let's talk about that Super Racer Bootcamp. There was a very interesting 18-minute clip that was put on YouTube about that selection process for the final round that involved getting out onto the track in a real-life Porsche Cayman GT4 car. But I think one thing that is becoming increasingly important, and it's being talked about on sim racing broadcasts, is not just being the best driver in the sim, but it's about being a good athlete, both mentally and physically. And that's something we've seen in the world's fastest gamers. And that's something that was a big emphasis of the Super Racer Bootcamp. And you did win that final bootcamp. You went through a series of grueling physical activities. And one thing that I think I saw on your Twitter was you said that you went from being one of the weaker drivers in that bootcamp at the start of it to being at the front at the end. Talk to us about the importance of physical training, mental training, and becoming a better overall athlete, as opposed to just focusing on the nit and gritty of being the best driver that you can.
Yeah, I was in the bootcamp 2 times. The first time really didn't go well because I started preparing for it maybe 4 weeks in advance, and really not good. I skipped days and stuff, so that really didn't go well. I'm always kind of sporty because I did football back in the days, and so yeah, I was fit already, but for the bootcamp you need a whole different level of fit. So for the next year I started half a year in advance, I think, and went to the gym every day to do go cycling and stuff, the indoor cycling, go running, build up a little bit of muscle strength and stuff. And I did that every year for half a year. It was a really intense year because obviously I was working. I had my apprenticeship going on. I still had my sim racing competitions going on, and I had to prepare for the boot camp, and that was a really tough half a year, for sure. And I was happy when it was over, but it was a great time as well. And then coming to the boot camp, as I said, the first time I was there, I got dead last with my performance there, and the next year we were really prepared for it really hard. I won it with not a lot of points, but I won it against the guys who did last year as well, and we're always really good in the fitness competitions, and it was a really good feeling for me, because it just kind of shows you that when you fail one time, you can fight back when you really prepare for it, try everything to win it, and you just can't do it. You can do everything if you really want to, and that was a. It sounds always sounds a bit bad if you say it, but just do your best if you want to compete in something and wanna win something, and you can definitely do it in the end.
And so then I'm sure that after the failure the first year, to come back that second year, to put yourself out front, and then to get into the wheel, or rather behind the wheel of a Porsche GT4 car, and to be able to rip it around a racetrack for a little bit, that must have been a very rewarding feeling, because it was your own hard work that got you there. But what were the emotions that you felt through that process in that final selection period? Because you're competing with a lot of other drivers that are very strong. They've got their own resumes behind them as well. And unfortunately, it didn't go your way. And I'm sure that was something that, for someone who maybe has grown up sim racing, that final step to get into real life motorsports, I think that's what a lot of us in sim racing wish that we could have that opportunity. And you came so close. And I'm sure that must have been a very disappointing moment. But at the same time, like I'm saying, a lot of positive emotions, given that it was your hard work that put yourself in that position in the first place.
It was a crazy feeling to, like, the first day we came there, we went into the headquarters of Löhner Racing. We looked at everything. Then we went to the track. We saw the cars which we will drive the next day. It was a crazy feeling. And the next day then it was raining like crazy. Like, I think it hasn't rained the whole year like that. The track was completely wet, and the first time in a racing car, the first time not the first time on a racetrack, but the first time on a racing car on a racetrack. And it was raining so badly. It was exciting, but also strange, because you don't know what the car would do or how the car would behave on such a wet track, because obviously on iRacing, on a race room, we also don't have wet weather settings, so that was completely new to me. But it was a lot of fun, and you actually don't see anything at all if you someone only behind one car, so I don't want to imagine how it is behind 10 cars on a grid. So that's kind of crazy. But I did my best. Obviously you still leave a little bit of gap that you don't crash the car or don't do anything stupid, but I did try to gain everything out of what I have. In the end it didn't work out, which was really disappointing at first, because we had like a selection process of I think 3 sessions, and after the 3 sessions 2 guys got picked to drive against each other once more to really see who's the best. And I didn't get picked for the last process, but when I saw who got picked, a really good friend of mine who I also known from the boot camp got picked for that, and another friend who did this for 3 years already, who has the experience in a Porsche GT4, got picked as well. So I didn't have a chance against the guy with the experience, of course, because he had 3 years of driving experiences, and he was for sure faster. And then the second guy had no experience at all, just like me, but he was as fast as the guy with the experience. So when I heard that, I was like, you fully deserve this. And when I see someone fully deserves to be there, then I'm not even mad anymore that I didn't get to do it.
And well, I'm sure you're now looking ahead to next year and potentially going back out there and trying to get that seat. How important is it to you to try and get a real world opportunity, at least once, to be able to go out there and show what you can do out on the real track? Because you're getting a lot of these opportunities. Hopefully next year, as the world starts to loosen travel restrictions, these LAN events will come back and they'll continue to grow, and you'll get more and more opportunities to travel the globe in that, portion of your career. But I'm sure there's still a slight focus to trying to get out there on the real world track and trying to make a run at potentially making this a career.
Yeah, I mean, that thought is always kind of there. Unfortunately, next year there's no Super Racer anymore because it couldn't happen this year because of COVID. But in the DTM, I won a test day with HP Racing in Tim Heinemann. Tim Heinemann is also a sim racer who got into real racing, and he won the DTM trophy this year, got the championship. And I will be able to drive his car next year for a test day. Maybe something comes out of it, I don't know. And in the GT Masters, I also won a track day with Der Motorsport in the McLaren GT4 as well. So, yeah, showing what you can do in a real race car is always nice, because the team managers of the real teams don't expect you to be fast or be anywhere close to, be able to drive that car in a good manner. So it's every time it's really funny when you do your laps, jump out of the car, and then he stands there like, damn, sim racing actually teaches you how to drive in real life, So this is always kind of fun, and yeah, maybe more people see it every year that sim racers are like really good in a real car as well. So I don't know, maybe something comes out of it next year when I do those test days. Who knows?
And I mean, all it takes is one opportunity. One of my teammates has been doing some local MX5 Cup racing. He got the opportunity to jump in with that team for the 25 Hours of Thunderhill, which is a big endurance race that gets run in the Northern Californian area. He won his class in a modified MX5 car, which had a lot of competition. So I think that's an opportunity. If you get that one chance to get out there on track, look at James Baldwin this year in the British GT. Sim racers have the talent, and it's all about getting opportunities to get on track and show them, like just you said there.
Yeah, as I said, the guy who won the Super Racer, Edwin Wald here, again, he was like the first time in a race car, just like me, and he won it there, and this year he won the whole championship there. So that just kind of shows you that sim racing is a big deal as well for real life racing. But my only thought every time is, if I don't earn money doing the real thing, what would I actually do? Because in sim racing I can earn tons of money doing it, and if I would do real racing, I would obviously not be able to do sim racing anymore to the point of which I could compete for championships. But doing it for 1 year, I would 100% do it, because I could jump back into sim racing the year after again. But obviously it would be kind of sad to miss out on 1 year. But yeah, I would definitely take the experience of doing a full championship in real life, definitely.
Hey, never say never. Your own teammate at Williams Esports, Sammy Matty Trogan, just signed a contract with Walken Horse Motorsport to do some Nürburgring races in the VLN RCN series. You've also got Ian Chan Guven, who is trying to qualify his way into the Porsche Tag Heuer Esports Super Cup after being a competitor in the Mobile One Real World Super Cup. So there's lots of opportunities. And let's talk very quickly about Williams, because you joined Williams in 2018. It's a team that's grown exponentially, I think, this year. A lot more involvement behind the scenes from various parties. And how much support do you get? You're part of the Race Room team. You've got a few other drivers who do compete in Race Room, but we have a few of your iRacing colleagues in the chat as well. How much cross-pollination is there in terms of talking about just driving or, just hanging out? Because one thing that when we talked to Sebastian Job is, at least within the Red Bull Esports team, there wasn't too much knowledge transfer happening between, let's say, the iRacing guys versus the other F1 esports guys. How does that work at Williams, and how much support are you also getting from the back of house team? Because I know there's a big management group behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, the support in between the different sims isn't that big, because obviously every sim is different, and an iRacing driver can't teach me how to drive Race Room. So there's not really a big communication between this. But I'm the guy who jumps between different sims, so I have to have contact with pretty much everyone across the sims. So there's a bit of communications, but most of the times not about how to drive one sim. But the support of Williams is great. Like, I think we built a really good relationship over the past 2 years, especially with Javi and Seb, my two managers. It's always fun with them to talk about things, and and the support of both of them is really good. Like, you don't have to really do much of work that you don't have to do as a driver. Like most social posts or like photos and stuff, they will do it, or the content managers will do it, and you just get it and have to post it, and you don't have to like create it yourself, which costs time and in the end would only result in less practice time for the races. So the support has been really great from Williams, and I'm really fortunate to be in this position with them.
It kind of goes on to what I've been thinking about very recently, which is, how do we continue to push the boundaries when it comes to sim racing? How do we get audiences engaged? And of course, we have our job to do on the broadcast to be able to bring new features, bring new points of interest onto the broadcast, new technology, things like that, and having the picture-in-picture with the drivers and the stuff like that. But at least as far as I'm concerned as well, it's also the point that the drivers and the teams also need to market and brand themselves. And of course, it's probably the most boring part, I suppose, of being a driver. I think some drivers want to just go to races, compete in races, and that's going to be it. That's all they want to do. But it's not just that. It's exactly like the real world, where you kind of have to market yourself and get your own following. Is that a sort of pressure that you've been dealing with as well, or are you one of those drivers that just wants to get their head down and just race?
I would say I'm a big social guy as well. Like, I don't have to be pressured to do social media. I really like to do it on my own way. So this isn't much of a big deal to me. As long as I don't have to do like photo editing for stuff that it takes me hours, and I'm fine with it. But when I get the content I have to post like photos and stuff, then it's no big deal. And as I said, I actually enjoy doing my own social media, because obviously it's how I present myself. Like, when my social media looks good, sponsors, or like even coming back to the older topic, even real life teams like to see a good social media. And this was, for example, in the bootcamp thing as well. Like, they looked at your social media, how you present yourself. This was also a big deal, which they took into consideration. And I think, having a good looking social media with updates every race you do, it can only be a positive thing for yourself. So I try to do it very well.
Yeah, and it only takes maximum 15 seconds to send out a tweet, even if you're just just describing what happened in the previous race, and it's surprising how many top sim racing drivers don't even do that. Let me tell you that, where they have very, very small followings as a result. But I'll throw this one back to you, Irina.
No, I think that's a good way to put it as well. And Moritz, you talked about the photo editing. One final question there. I know you used to do a lot of that as part of the InSim photography brand for the Williams team. How much of a relief is it that you don't necessarily have to do that much anymore? Because that, like you say, takes a lot of the time commitment, and that's time that you can't spend practicing. You can't spend maybe even racing if you're on iRacing, for example, and just want to do a few casual races. But that's where the team support comes in at the end of the day and lessens the workload on you as a driver.
Yeah, I mean, the InSim is still my and Moreno's work. Like, we still do all the photos we post there and do there. So, but I did a lot at the start of the year, but when all my competitions kicked off, I really had not a lot of time to actually do most of the photos. So I did only the race room part, and I have to thank Moreno for that, because Moreno did most of the iRacing part, which was quite a lot of work, because we had a lot of series on iRacing as well. So thank you, Moreno, to that you helped out there a lot. And it's a nice project going on, like on the side. And I mean, it's a lot of fun for me to edit photos, to make photos, to find the right perspectives and stuff. That's a lot of fun, and I don't see that as being something bad, because I only do it when I really have time for it.
Well, I tell you what, Moritz, thanks for diving into some various topics in your history, but you mentioned it when we jumped on just before we went on air. You're now on a little bit of a holiday. You've got a little bit of a break between some of your competitions, and one of the things that you mentioned you potentially want to jump into is the last 2 rounds of the Porsche Esports Super Cup qualifiers for the next season, which is going to kick off on the 9th of January, so just about 7 weeks away. And you mentioned your teammate there, Moreno Surica. Moreno's currently sitting 2nd in the standings. Your other teammate, Daniel Lafuente, I believe, is down in 9th as things stand. You want to jump in rather to these qualifying races in the next 2 weekends, and the reality of the situation is, with the brand new qualifications format, a good result in either of those races, let alone good results in both of those races, could definitely propel you back into the World Championship fold on the iRacing side of things. But we head to Spa-Francorchamps and Interlagos, 2 very interesting tracks in the Porsche 911 Cup car. Talk to us about what you're expecting in terms of racing action, because obviously Spa, lots of drafting, lots of side-by-side dueling, and only 10 laps. I've been talking to some of the drivers. There is a need to balance your risk versus reward in terms of how much you want to push the track limits, given that, well, you can gain a lot of time if you choose to take some alternate lines that we saw maybe in the Spa 24 hours this year in the real world.
Yeah, I actually wanted to fully try to qualify for the Porsche next year, because the schedule is really good for the main championship, with only at the first half of the year, or even first quarter of the year. So I wanted to try to fully qualify for it, but the qualifying phase was right in the ending phase of the GT Masters and DTM Esports. So there was a no-go for me to do the first 3 races. But yeah, with the last race of GT Masters now from last weekend, I started practicing iRacing again from Sunday, and it's a tough time to get back into it. Like I still struggle a lot to find the pace. I think all my teammates are at least 0.3 faster a lap in the race, which is huge in the series. So it would be a really hard time, especially Spa and Interlagos are I think the worst tracks for me to come back, because the tracks are really challenging. Whereas Sebring, for example, was quite easy for me to get back into it. I did some service races there. But yeah, I think Spa and Interlagos will be quite hard for me to get good results and actually qualify even for the super session. But I will try my best, and I think, as we have seen in the previous races, there's a lot of action going on. And if I'm just clean there and can get through all the carnage, I could actually get some good positions and finishes out of it. And who knows, maybe it works out in the end. It would obviously be really good.
And Connor, a question for you here. This new qualifying format has really shaken everything up in many ways, because you have to get into these super sessions that take place on a Saturday morning, and that means that those strength of field races that we're seeing on Thursday and Friday, as we get 30 drivers who try to make their way into the super sessions, have been some of the craziest racing that I can remember seeing anywhere. They're not even broadcast races, but the amount of action is crazy, and it means that if you aren't able to get into a super session, you leave yourself at risk of not getting the points that you need to qualify. And one of the big names that's been struggling is Peter Berryman. He won last year's qualifying series. Unfortunately, ineligible to compete in the Super Cup this past year. He's trying to re-qualify, but unfortunately, he's not in the top 20 right now, and he's struggled to make it into the Super Session races.
Yeah, that one's a very surprising one, considering we have a lot of rookies, trying to get themselves qualified. I'm looking further up the field. Like you said, Daniel Lafuente, I think that was going to be his first appearance in at least a solo entry World Championship if he's able to get himself in. I'm seeing the likes of Alexander Voltas up there. You got Danny Algabay, Ricardo Rico, a lot of the Spanish contingent actually making themselves known and trying to get themselves their first appearances inside of an iRacing World Championship. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle for Peter Berryman down in P29 at the moment to be able to get anything done. Of course, just like what Moritz has been describing, just one good result in these final 2 races, might propel you inside the top 20, and I think that's what Peter Berryman has to be hoping for at this point. Just get a podium finish, perhaps, in these last 2 races, and he might just about be there. But for a driver of his caliber, of his caliber, excuse me, it's kind of a very, very tough situation to be in, and one that I don't think he even needs to be in with how good he is. It just seems like he's really, really struggled with the car this season.
Well, for those watching live on our video feeds, you're getting a look at the standings. Charlie Collins leads with 145 points after 2 consecutive wins and a second place in the first round. Moreno Surica in second with last year's 60 hours of practice driver Brian Lockwood in third place as things stand. One of your other teammates, Moritz, is in fourth position, Diogo C. Pinto, and he's just joined up with the Williams team. Williams has 3 cars in the top 20, so does the Kova team. Moritz, how important is it for the Williams team as an outfit to get a number of drivers into this series? So right now it's looking like Moreno Surica, Diogo C. Pinto, and the third driver, Daniel Lafuente, all in a good position with 2 races to go. And there's still an opportunity, I would think, for maybe you and Josh Thompson as well to get up into that top 20 in the points.
Yeah, I think as one of the biggest sim racing teams for Williams, it's important to have at least 1 car in the World Championship. We missed out on that last year, so it would be really good to have Williams Esports back there competing in this championship again. And at the moment, it's really looking good for Moreno and Diogo, as well as for Daniel in P8. I really hope for Josh that he can make it in. He's in, I think, 22 right now. He had a really rough year this year, so I really hope he can make it and show himself in the World Championship of what he can do.
Well, other drivers to also look out for, Zach Campbell. We talk about this interesting qualifying format. He won race number 1, only got 4 points since that initial race win, so he's languishing in 9th as things stand. Needs 2 impressive drives to secure his qualification entry. But Connery, I mentioned it before, Ian Chan Guvan, he's trying to qualify in for the Coanda Simsport team. Another real-life driver that is trying to join him, though, is Phil Denez, who's currently sitting in 20th. Denez runs in the Road to Indy ladder, so trying to get up into the full-time IndyCar series, but at the same time, he represents Vendaval Sim Racing, and he's someone who's made it into all 3 of these Super Session races, but unfortunate results in the first 2 have put him on the edge of the top 20. But it's good to see a number of these professional racing drivers trying to compete in the top level of sim racing as well.
I mean, they're basically trying to follow in the footsteps of what Max Verstappen did last season, but unfortunately, because of the whole COVID rescheduling situation, he wasn't able to turn up to the vast majority of the Porsche Esports Super Cup races, which means that he's also disqualified for the next season because he didn't reach the quota, shall we say? But absolutely, it's great to see a lot of these real life drivers sort of getting themselves involved in it once again. Even after real life racing has returned. Shall we say, because I was always scared in the middle of this pandemic that it would only be temporary with a lot of these drivers. They're only doing it just because they can't go out and do the real life racing, but it looks like a large amount of them have actually stuck around. And I kind of want to go back to what I said a couple of months ago to someone. I can't exactly remember the exact details, but it was to the effect of, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the semi-pro to pro real-life drivers in lower series actually continue on with sim racing in a competitive sense, just because it makes financial sense if they're good at it. It's the exact same thing Moritz said. It's like, always hoping to do sim racing because you can make money off of sim racing, whereas real life racing is an expensive endeavor, and there's no guarantee that you'll be able to, do well enough to be able to, make a living off of it. So and to make a career off of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of those lower formula, lower tier. This is not an insult on anyone, by the way. I'm just going to say that. I'm just saying, comparatively speaking, some of the sort of semi-pro real-life drivers will actually get themselves more into sim racing because it just makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not just F1 that has its own concept of silly season. We're well and truly in the iRacing silly season of things. We just mentioned Diogo C. Pinto, who left SimRC a few months ago, has just recently signed up with the Williams Esports teams. Lots of other rumors circulating. There were some rumors that last year's champion Sebastian Job wouldn't return to Red Bull Esports, but as far as I can tell, that does not appear to be the case. About 99% sure Job will stay with the Red Bull Esports team. But Connery, I'm going to just throw this out there to you. Charlie Collins, there's a lot of speculation swirling around the Welshman right now. Some fantastic qualifying performances in this championship series. Rumor speculating, though, two big teams interested in his signing. A, Williams Esports, that Moritz might know a little bit more about. But number two, Coanda SimSport. Either way for Charlie Collins, he's in next year's championship as things stand. If he joins Coanda, though, we're looking at that famous team in sim racing now having almost a quarter of all drivers on next year's grid.
I'm kind of mixed on that one. I wouldn't mind too much if he goes to Williams, but in terms of Coanda, we are in danger once again of having the quote-unquote super team situation, which has its own advantages for whichever team is the super team in these sorts of tournaments. Even though it's not a team's championship, teammates can certainly help you. Whether or not that's blatant or not, it still remains to be seen. I'm just reminded of the end of the 2018 season. I'm sorry, but yeah, it kind of scares me. I know the likes of Porsche and Iracing kind of, especially with the rules coming in for what was the 2020 season of a team only requiring 4 drivers, but of course you can just split up your teammates into different sponsor teams, which, if you ask me, doesn't do enough to quite do it. But I'm not sure how you would solve that situation of half the grid being under one team. Without just trying to dictate, without trying to say, like, the draft system, for example, try and enforce it that way. It's a very difficult situation. I know Porsche and Iracing don't really like the fact that there's not that much variety on the grid, but we'll have to see what happens, because I don't have any good solutions. Because in other esports, the fact that you're only allowed 5 players at a time on a Counter-Strike map is the limiting factor. Of course, recently you've had teams get 6th and 7th players as sort of substitutes, but that's really the limit. It's the same in Overwatch, it's the same in League of Legends. You only have like 5 to 7 people, including substitutes in that situation. So, but in sim racing, there's no such thing, unless it's a championship that's designed with constructors in mind. So, there's no easy solutions to this. I don't like to see it. I want to see variety, and that's not an attack on Coanda. It's not an attack on anyone in particular, really. It's just the fact that I want to see variety in terms of the teams, in terms of the even from an optics perspective, the liveries and things like that. Up there in the top level of sim racing, instead of being completely dominated by just one team. And of course, someone like Coanda is going to come back and say, well, we didn't win the previous championship. Red Bull Racing Esports with Sebastian and Joe won the previous championship, but that's kind of not the point that I'm trying to make. It's kind of I kind of think it would be healthier for the scene if things were a little bit more diverse.
Well, and for SimRC, who have not only lost Diogo C. Pinto, but now the rumors circulating around the Welshman Charlie Collins, must be a slight disappointment for that German outfit that has become increasingly strong in iRacing competitions. But that's going to be it then for another episode of Talking Tents. Thank you to Moritz Löhner for joining us, driver for Williams Esports, a multiple championship winner across race rooms, and also a multiple world championship competitor on the iRacing service. Before we go, though, let's preview another great weekend of racing action coming up live on RaceBot TV. This Friday, join us for one more round of the Friday Night Primetime Series as we showcase the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship over the course of its 12-week season. Later that evening, stick around for qualifying for the Open Wheels Veterans 100, running a fixed setup and the Dallara DW12 chassis. On Saturday, the action kicks off with the penultimate round of the Porsche Esports Super Cup qualifiers from Spa-Francorchamps in what should be a crazy race. And also catch round number 7 of the iRacing Rallycross World Championship presented by Yokohama Tire from the Lucas Oil Raceway. We also have full coverage of the Open Wheels day before the 500, including the Veterans 100 and the pit stop competition. And with only one event to focus on Sunday, it is the Open Wheels 500-mile race presented by Mitchell Transmissions, and you can catch it live on RaceBot TV. Time to say goodbye for now, but For Connery Maddock, Hugo Luis, my name is Arjuna Kankipati, and you can catch us in 2 weeks' time for another episode of Talking Tense.